Let's get back to that dopey decision to effectively block a gold mine in the central west of New South Wales on dubious Indigenous heritage grounds. The coalition is trying to get it overturned. They had a Senate disallowance motion go down narrowly the other week, but Shadow Environment Minister Jonathon Duniam tells me they're not giving up on that fight.
No, we won't give up, Chris, because the right thing that needs to be done here, it is in the national interests to allow this mine to proceed. Labor calls itself the friend of the worker. They want to have a future made in Australia, yet they have these spurious and, in the minds of some, fabricated claims on Indigenous cultural heritage as a basis for blocking a mine that have full state and full federal environmental and planning approval. It is the wrong decision, and that's why we gave senators an opportunity with our disallowance motion to overturn the decision. It was the right thing to do. They failed on that count. So they've now got a second chance, and that is to back in a bill that would, again, overturn Minister Plibersek's decision because, as anyone will tell you, this company, the proponents of the mine, Regis Resources, have complied with every rule of the land, including when it comes to cultural heritage. So we're going to keep up the fight and hopefully we get the right outcome.
Now, will this bill pertain only to this particular mine and this particular cultural heritage intervention? Because surely we need something that actually looks at the system here where developers, whether it be for a mine, any sort of project, you actually deal with one official cultural heritage authority, if you like, and which is what happened in this case. The local Orange Aboriginal Land Council gave the mine the okay. They had no objections in the end, and you get another group coming in. Don't we need to have some certainty here that you're actually dealing with the appropriate authorities so that once you get a decision, you can move forward?
Yeah, well, absolutely. First, just on the bill, it does only deal with this mine and this location and the concerns that were raised by this small group of locals. And that is a problem. It's based on the Hindmarsh Island Bridge Act of 1997, which I think you've written about previously, and it is a good tool to be able to overturn a bad decision. But you're right. We do need certainty here. I mean, I just travelled to Western Australia a couple of weeks ago. The number one thing on every potential investor's mind was sovereign risk. And the piece of legislation that Tanya Plibersek relied on to make this decision, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Heritage Protection Act of 1984, Section 10 in particular, is one of the most open-ended pieces of legislation I have ever seen. Anyone who claims to be Aboriginal or of Torres Strait Islander descent, who feels that a piece of land or a waterway that is at risk of desecration and they have a link to it, they can submit a written or oral claim, and the minister then goes through a process and makes a decision, as Minister Plibersek did on this occasion. It needs tightening up. We've committed that we will rewrite that legislation. We'll do it properly. Investors need to know who they're dealing with. They can't go through these full-on processes and then get to the end and face this decision. That is a terrible outcome on any measure.
Well, it's not just the developers of the mine and the people who support the mine who are absolutely frustrated and outraged by this decision. It's the Aboriginal groups themselves, the Aboriginal Land Council, who now see themselves as being irrelevant. There's going to be a meeting in Orange next month of representatives of Aboriginal Land Councils right around New South Wales. So concerned are they about this decision? So shouldn't, at the very least, the minister be actually reopening this case and investigating the claims that were put forward, because a lot of Aboriginal representatives and groups say it should have been dismissed?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, the Orange Local Aboriginal Land Council actually did bell the cat on this group and said, look, we're concerned that this group of individuals have united and are confecting claims. They are hijacking a process to get an outcome they want, when it was the Orange Aboriginal Land Council that is recognised at law as the authority to speak on behalf of country. So there is something very amiss here. And Roy RC, who happens to be a Wiradjuri elder, came to Orange to the Bush Summit and he spoke up about how he feels about it. He said her decision basically undercuts decades of advancement in recognition of Indigenous rights and control over land. And it basically renders the Aboriginal land councils that have been established across the country as ineffective and no longer going to have any effect on these outcomes. So if someone like Roy RC is saying that, who happens to be from that neck of the woods and Wiradjuri elder, it does make you wonder why Tanya Plibersek doesn't want to reopen the books and tell us why she's made the decision she has and at least overturn it.
Just finally on this, Jonathon, how infuriating is it that we can't get this basic stuff right that's so important to the economy and to local Aboriginal groups? We're completely making a hash of that, yet we have a so-called First Nations ambassador flying around the world spending hundreds of thousands of dollars talking about goodness knows what's about climate change and God knows what else.
Yeah, look, I'll tell you what, I don't think there are many disadvantaged First Nations people out there doing much better because of a so-called First Nations ambassador. I mean, this actually demonstrates perfectly the tokenistic approach taken by some. Frankly, I think it is offensive that anyone would be masquerading in such a role, and I think Peter Dutton's right. The role needs to go. How can someone in Central Northern Territory and some of those remote communities point to that role and go, yes, I am benefiting as a result? It makes people in Canberra feel better, probably parts of Melbourne and Sydney too, but it's doing 2/5 of nothing to help people who actually need a helping hand. We have ambassadors for Australia, for all Australians. Thanks so much for joining us, Jonathon. Thanks, Chris.